Live from the mist-enshrouded mountaintop fortress that is X and Y Communications headquarters, you're listening to the world-famous Mountaintop Podcast. And now, here's your host, Scott McKay.
All right, gentlemen, welcome again to yet another episode of the world-famous Mountaintop Podcast. My name is Scott McKay, at Scott McKay on both Twitter and Clubhouse, Real Scott McKay on Instagram, YouTube. Look for my name, SCOTMCKAY, and you will find the videos. The website address, as always, is mountaintoppodcast.com. And gentlemen, if you are not yet on board with Facebook, as a part of our Facebook group, which is the Mountaintop Summit, I invite you. Consider it your cordial invitation to join us once and for all. Look up Mountaintop Summit on Facebook and join our group of guys who are getting better with women and getting better as men in general. On that note, today I have a new friend of mine. He's a good guy. He hails from Toronto, Canada, which a lot of our guests seem to. His name is JP Pawliw-Fry. He's a New York Times bestselling author of a book called Performing Under Pressure, and he also has an upcoming book that we're pretty excited about seeing when it hits the press called The Last 8%. Today, we are going to have the pleasure of discussing the main topic of his best-selling book, Performing Under Pressure. And I'll tell you what, guys, this is a topic that is important to all of us as high-achieving men. And I think we got the right guy to discuss all of this with. So without anything further, JP Pawliw-Fry, how's it going, man?
Oh, great, Scott. Good to be here.
Yeah, it's likewise nice to have you. I think the first thing we need to do is throw on the table this idea of being the last 8%. Seems kind of arbitrary. You know, what of these other 92%? What are those people doing compared to the last 8%? And why would we want to be a last 8% kind of guy? Tell us, man.
Yeah, great to be here and happy to tell you. So imagine 8 years ago, I'm working with a senior leader at a company, and he and somebody else in his organization, they're on the senior team, and they weren't getting along. So they asked me to work with them, and I facilitated, was coaching them to have a conversation. They had the conversation, kind of a difficult conversation. They came back to talk with me in our independent coaching calls, and I said, how'd it go? They said it was horrible. The only thing they could agree on was they wanted me to facilitate, mediate a conversation between the two of them. That's what we did. 2.5 hours later, we finished. A couple of days later, I have my independent, coaching calls with each of them. And I asked them, how'd it go? And they both said, oh my gosh, so much better. I said, that's fantastic. And I said, did you say everything you wanted to say? And they both immediately agreed, in their independent coaching calls. Yeah, absolutely. I said, really? And I was in the call. I'm like, really? You said everything you wanted to say. And of course, when I pushed them, they both agreed, well, maybe not. And that was the start of this idea of trying to understand, what do we leave on the table? What do we not say that we really want to say? And so we did a study of 34,000 people, and we found that actually we humans are pretty good at getting to 85, 90, 92% of what we want to say in a conversation. Could be at work, could be with our partner, someone we're dating, could be someone in our personal life. But when we get to that more difficult part of the conversation, that last 8%, a funny thing happens. As I'm having the conversation and we're getting into the last 8%, that other person senses where the conversation is going. They recognize that there are consequences in some way, shape, or form to our conversation for them. They get triggered a bit. They get emotional. I get infected by their emotion. And as opposed to approaching, facing that last 8%, that more difficult part of the conversation, I back off. I avoid it. Now, here's the problem. They can't read our mind. They don't know we're not having the full conversation. And in fact, we leave the conversation thinking, yeah, I talked about most of the things I wanted to talk about, checking off the boxes, conveniently leaving out that last 8%. A month later, we're looking at them and we're wondering, why are you being so, what's going on? I thought we had the conversation. They're looking at us going, JP, why are you being so passive aggressive? I thought we're on track. Like, what's going on? The problem is we never had the last 8% conversation. So Scott, that's where it started. And in that 34,000 person study, we did a subsequent study where we found it's not just difficult conversations we avoid, it's also difficult decisions we avoid. Thinking about the folks who are listening, do we really express our feelings, number one, on the conversation side? On the decision side, are we in a relationship that really does serve us? And when I say serve us, I don't mean selfish, but like meet our needs? Or are we in a relationship because, well, it's convenient, it's habitual, whatever? Are we making the tough call to leave a relationship if it's not working? That's my point. And so last 8% are the difficult conversations, the difficult decisions, and even the difficult opportunities to meaningfully connect that we avoid because of fear. So that's the last 8%.
Wow, there's a lot there. So the first thing I thought of was kind of like advice from Thumper's mother. If you can't say anything nice, don't say anything at all. And I'm assuming the blunt conversations, the things that probably should be said but might ruffle a feather or two, are within that 8%.
Yeah, exactly, Scott. I'll just say this. Yes, it's about having the last 8%, but then it's how do you have the last 8%? Because of the way our brain is designed, emotion comes before thought. We feel before we think. And because we feel before we think, if someone's coming on strong to us, let's say, in a last 8% conversation, like say they're having a last 8% with us, because emotion comes before thought, if they don't do it well, then all of a sudden I'm going to get triggered. And for about 18 minutes, which is the half-life of cortisol, just a stress chemical, stress hormone, we're not able to hear them. And so turn that around. When we're having a last 8% with someone, it's not just about having it. It's about how skillfully can we have it? Because many of us at times, we either avoid or we get so worked up and we come on too strong and we make a mess. And now that person can't hear us. And that's not very effective either.
So in other words, if you fumble the ball during the last 8%, you basically have had a 0% conversation. Nobody's going to get anything out of it.
That's exactly it. They shut down. They can't hear us anyway.
You will have messed up the whole chance to collaborate there, and you won't have a whole lot of rapport being built, and then business dealings, romantic dealings, et cetera, fall apart at the seams because we didn't know how to have that 8% conversation.
That's precisely it.
You know, one of the things I've noticed over my considerable tenure here as a living, breathing human being is that there are two kinds of people. And I believe I've mentioned this on the show before. I believe there are people who will collectively piss on each other's legs and tell each other that it's raining, BSing each other to make each other feel good. And people who are blunt and tell it the way it is. And I don't think any of the former variety of people particularly like the latter version of people much, and vice versa. So people who are blunt tend to like other people who will just go ahead and darn it, just tell me what you think, let's get on with it. And other people don't want their feelings hurt and they like to fluff each other up a little bit. When they meet someone who they don't like, they go, so nice to meet you, like Legally Blonde. So nice, right? And yet you don't really get anything done unless you throw things on the table that need to be thrown on the table. This is very important in business collaborations. You don't negotiate, the deal doesn't get done. But certainly in romantic relationships, a guy can sit here and have a nice fluffy conversation with a woman all he wants to, but until he asks her out or until he takes it from a platonic to a sexual place, that 8% of the conversation didn't get covered. Am I on the right track here?
You're absolutely correct. And they come in many different shapes and sizes. Like when you're first dating, to attempt to have that first kiss. I mean, that's a last 8% situation. You've got to read the room, read the situation, and then take a bit of a risk, right? Some of the work I have done over the last 15 years is with the U.S. Navy. And there's a saying at the Navy, which I love, which is ships are safe in the harbor, but that's not what ships are for, right? Our lives are not meant to be lived in the harbor where it's safe. Our lives are meant to be lived outside the harbor where, yes, there's more risk, but there's also more reward. And that pertains to so many things. That first kiss, asking partners to go to the next level, whatever that might be at whatever stage in a relationship. But another really big one is actually taking the risk to express how we're feeling. This is something that I think men could just so build on because that's what women want. They want to be intimately connected with us. And it's not, yes, sexually and physically, but emotionally. We know from really good research, that is what drives great relationships. And so I will challenge everyone listening right now. What are you not saying that you really feel inside that you're not saying because of fear? Because we have a certain idea about what it means to be either a man or what it means to be a human being and strong and powerful. And I'll tell you, the best relationships, you can still be strong and powerful. And in fact, I would argue being strong and powerful is to say, here's how I'm feeling. I'm having a tough day. I had a tough interaction with my boss, partner, and I'd like to talk about it. The people who we're in relationship with crave that because they want to understand us. They want to be able to serve and be part of our lives. And in some ways we avoid that opportunity to meaningfully connect. And it's a shame, to be honest.
Well, the woman wants to recharge the warrior's batteries with femininity. And when we deprive women of that chance to do that, they feel a little kind of shut out because we're so tough and we're so macho. We forget to let that femininity come into our lives and build us back up again. A good woman knows you're a man. She knows you're trying to be a hero. She knows that you're a warrior and that you're all about her safety and security. And the gift that she gives back to such a man is that recharging of batteries with fun, play, nurture, comfort. And the beauty of the secret of the universe there is that it all really works. It's fantastic. I love what you're saying because not only does it apply to business, not only does it apply to romance, it also applies to our relationships with guys we play sports with, guys we go to war with, people we build business partnerships with. You have to say what needs to be said. You have to spill it out. You have to take risks. You have to feel into that, or else nobody is ever going to be on the same page. And I love it. And the simple truth is it really does have everything to do with our topic du jour, which is performing under pressure.
Mm-hmm.
You talk about fear a lot. You've mentioned that word several times. And around here, we kind of think of fear as the opposite of love. If I love you, I'm not afraid of you. I'm not scared of you. I don't dislike you. All of those emotions, the positive ones flock together and the negative ones kind of flock together. So why wouldn't we perform under pressure? Well, because of fear. It doesn't matter if we need to do something or if we don't need to do it. If we're confident that we can do it, we know it needs to be done, and we know we're the right person in the right seat on the right bus to make it happen, then we will perform under pressure. And how does that all tie in to being a last 8% person? Because It was in your work that you started talking about performing under pressure as kind of a sub-conversation from this. So I'm sure in your mind it has everything to do with this, right?
Yeah, for sure. There's a lot there. So there's a number of reasons why we are not able to perform under pressure. And the biggest one is an inability to manage emotions. And so, I work with NFL teams, NBA teams, Olympic athletes, and, we have this idea that, the best athletes, the best performers perform better under pressure than their peers. Or let me say this, actually, let me even cut a finer point, that people, some rise to the occasion and perform under pressure. Now, that's absolutely incorrect. It's a myth. Nobody performs better under pressure. And we've got the data to support that. In the book, we go into it. There's a lot of research around this, not just even my idea. This is what science has found. But it's interesting. If you understand, I'll give you a good example, by the way. Michael Jordan, not a bad basketball player. Michael Jordan shoots worse under pressure when he shoots a free throw in pressure situations, playoff games when they're up or down or tied. He shoots worse in those particular pressure situations than his season average, his playoff average. And that is consistent with every NBA player in the history of the game. Nobody performs better under pressure. I'll give you one more example. Mr. October. Remember Reggie Jackson?
Sure.
Right. We used to call Mr. October because he hit so many home runs in October, better than his regular season. And that's wrong. Statistically speaking, his best October, and for those who aren't baseball fans, that's the playoffs, Mr. October, his best October was fifth best compared to his season average in his career. No, he didn't perform better under pressure. Now, here's the caveat. Everyone is negatively affected by pressure. But Michael Jordan, Reggie Jackson were affected less by pressure. They were worse than their season, their playoff averages, but they were less affected than you and me, than anyone else. And so in comparison, you could say they're performed under pressure, but it's a myth. And the reason I make this point, Scott, is because if any of us walk into a date, into a golf game, into a big presentation, and we think, oh my gosh. I'll tell you the story we tell ourselves. And I've seen this. I've been to 6 Olympic Games, so I've seen this in Olympics. I've seen this in big competitions. People walk in, they're like, oh my gosh, I'm at an Olympics or I'm at the Super Bowl. And they tell themselves this story. This is a higher level competition. So in order to be successful, I'm going to need to perform better than I've ever performed before. That's the story we all tell ourselves. And yet, because of the pressure, they will inevitably make more mistakes during that Super Bowl, during that Olympics, than they normally do. And what happens is if you walk into that pressure situation thinking, I've got to be perfect in order to be successful. Well, guess what? You just weren't perfect. And for those who aren't prepared, when they inevitably make that mistake, they're not perfect. They start to, because they believe in the story, I need to be perfect to be successful. Now they go into this downward loop. They feel shame, embarrassment. I think of Cam Newton in the Super Bowl some years ago. He had a horrible first couple of series against Denver, and he just couldn't get out of it. And so this is what happens for all of us. So to perform under pressure, we need a different skill set. We need a different mindset. And most people are not aware of this.
Yeah, and I want to dive into exactly what it takes to perform under pressure. But I think I'd be remiss if I didn't bring up a couple of points that I think are really going to illuminate this conversation. First of all, you talked about baseball, and I grew up a Baltimore Orioles fan, and I'm going to, as I often do on this show, age myself.
Love Cal Ripken. Oh, my
yeah.
goodness.
Well, this is probably right at the beginning of Cal Ripken's career, maybe even a little bit before. The last time the Orioles went to the World Series was 1983, and Ripken was there then. And the time before that was 79, where they lost to the Pittsburgh Pirates, and I don't think he was there then. But the guy who I'm going to talk about right now he was a relief pitcher who was kind of a bit of a flash in the pan in the league. He made at least one All-Star game. But his name was Don Stanhouse. And you'd have to be a pretty avid American League East fan at least, which you may be up in Toronto, to remember this cat. But he was known as alternatively as Stan the Man Unusual, which is a nod to Stan Musial, but his last name was Stanhouse. Or as Earl Weaver, the chain-smoking, irascible manager of the Orioles at the time, now in the Hall of Fame, of course, called him Full Pack. Because whenever this guy was on the mound, Earl would have to smoke an entire pack of cigarettes just to keep his sanity while the guy was up there. And this guy would build pressure on purpose while on the mound. No one had ever seen anything like it, and we haven't seen anything since. He was the closer, and he would come out with 2 guys on base, 2 guys out, and he would come to the mound and it was like the equivalent in the NFL of taking 3 timeouts to isolate the hitter. He would just stand up there stone cold. And I remember one time Chuck Thompson, the Baltimore Orioles legendary announcer, I can still remember the words reverberating. Don Stanhouse has been on the mound for 4 minutes and 54 seconds and has yet to throw a pitch. Now, to come out as a closer and stand there for an entire 5 minutes is an eternity.
Yeah.
When the whole game is on the line.
Yeah.
And what he would do is he would stare down the guy on first base and throw to the first baseman.
Yeah.
He would do it again. So he wasn't stalling the game the whole time. He would take as long as he needed. And it seemed like this guy wielded pressure to his advantage, almost like weaponizing it, because in his mind, he was going to deal with the pressure a lot better than the hitter. So whether he's performing better under pressure than not under pressure, I guess, like you say, maybe not, right? But one thing he was very confident of was he was going to handle it better than the hitter.
Well, I think that's the point, is he understood that hitter felt pressure.
Yes.
I mean, this is the interesting part that most of us miss. When we're under pressure, let's say on a team, we're not the only one who's feeling pressure. Everyone else is. And the real leader among us is the person who could still own, I feel pressure, but sit there and go, so does my colleague. So does my direct report. And in this case, Don Stanhouse, I remember him with the Montreal Expos.
Yes,
he play the Expos at some point?
That is correct, yes.
Right. But
on.
What he was able to do, I don't remember your story about him, but just what I'm speculating is he recognized these batters are under pressure too. And like you say, weaponized it. And we can do that. I mean, we truly can do that in the world of sport. And it takes a lot of confidence to do that. And more than anything, it takes this ability to stand outside of ourselves, because for many of us, pressure makes us more self-referential. We get more focused on our needs. And as a leader and as a partner, by the way, there's just an absolute superpower if under pressure you can sit there, step outside yourself and think, I wonder what she's feeling right now. I wonder what they're feeling right now. And that will be a differentiator for us in our career, but also in our relationships. That level of empathy to get outside of ourselves and wonder, hey, I wonder how they're doing. I wonder what's going on for them. That is like huge in terms of performance and leading a team and being effective. Don Stanhouse clearly had something going on around that. That's a very interesting story, Scott.
I want to jump in with a couple of ideas there that are extremely relevant to what you talked about. In the business world, in the sales world specifically, as soon as there's a high ticket opportunity with a lot at stake, it's amazing how all the newbies and how all the people who aren't quite the seasoned professionals as perhaps some of the other guys out there, some of the other, well, frankly, better salespeople, they all fold up. Yeah. Like a bad poker hand. They start seeing dollar signs. They start focusing on their potential commission instead of the customer, instead of taking a deep breath, feeling into that pressure and making something happen. And the beauty of what you're giving to these gentlemen here who are listening, JP, is this concept that, hey, you know what? If you can get out of your own head for a second, step aside from the pressure you're feeling and realize the person across the table is feeling that pressure, then you can make fewer mistakes than they will. You can relax a little bit more into the common feeling everybody's having. And here's the big deal, I think. Realize there's a lot of pressure on the customer in that situation to make the right decision.
It's true.
The more I can make that customer feel comfortable with that decision they're making to go with my company and my solution, and equally importantly, the better I make them look with the people they answer to, the greater the likelihood I'm going to get the business.
Yeah, Scott, you're really on it there. And sorry to interrupt. I just have to say this. What I love about what you just said is that in sales, if you can sit there, first of all, there's a ton of fear, a lot of last 8% situations, being afraid of the phone, being afraid to ask for the business, on and on and on. But I love what you just said, this idea that can you sit there and actually have empathy for your client in that moment? Because they're worried about making the right decision. They're worried about how that reflects on to their colleagues and how people are going to view them. And to actually have that empathy and not be so kind of driven by our own needs, because we know from research, people buy in order, people, ideas, and product, not the other way around. Most of us walk in a sales situation, we think they're buying the product. So we got to think about the benefits and all the different parts of the product. Oh, okay. So then it's not the product, it's the idea. Then we got to sell them on this idea, this model, this paradigm or whatever. No, they're not buying products, ideas. They're buying us. People buy people, ideas, then product. And so the biggest thing we want to do, and people know, everyone knows this, but under pressure, we forget it. It's that relationship. So your point is so well taken around that importance of empathy in that critical last 8% decision moment for your client.
Well, you're helping me make my point for me, for sure. Okay. And the one thing I want to add there is kind of a little cherry on top to this business portion of this conversation is if you're doing big ticket sales, if you're in the business to business world and you're trying to cheat or swindle your customer, just take your ball and go home, please. It isn't going to work. No one closes $2 million, $5 million, $400 million deals because they cheated somebody. It isn't going to happen. They're too smart for that. There are too many analytics and metrics at stake. You might as well show up with the best solution and help your customer understand that you're part of it being the best solution because you're the one heading up the team on the other side of the table, for sure. Now, because this is a relationship show for men, this has to come back around to the point I was going to make, which is when we're in front of a woman and we're seeking to attract her, perhaps build a relationship with her, get to know her better, the exact same human truths apply. I tell guys this all the time. So many times we get on a first date with a woman, we've met her online or she's been someone we've had our eye on, and we ask her out and we're finally out there in front of her, taking her out to dinner or whatever we're doing. And we're worried about what she thinks of us.
Yeah.
We're worried about being rejected. Oh my God, what if I say something stupid? And then you forget to look across the table and realize let's use the vernacular that this show's built around, right? She's feeling pressure. She's like, oh my God, do I look cute? Does he like me? Is he going to mistreat me? Is he the one? Women are thinking all kinds of crazy stuff across the table from us. And yet, one of the major tenets of being masculine is helping a woman feel safe and comfortable. If you're doing the opposite, if you're making her feel uneasy, she's not going to be attracted. It's primal. It's a primal element of attraction. Yet, all right, let's use your 8% analogy. I bet you 92% of men out there fail to have that 8% conversation where they just simply tell the woman, hey, you know what? I'm already having a good time. You look better than your pictures online. I'm enjoying this time with you. Now, obviously, if that's a lie, you'd want to save it and just, be cordial and move on. Take your ball and go home, right? But that's very important to understand, is that this idea of making someone feel comfortable, getting outside your own head and realizing what they have going on, isn't unique to Don Stanhouse. It isn't unique to your business principles. It is a huge key of taking a situation where there's a lot at stake and making the best of it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think you're right on. If I could give advice to everyone listening, it's show up, get outside your head and tune in and really be interested in them, not be interesting. And know that they are in a place of worrying about how they're coming across. And if you can just sit there and ask good questions and really take interest and really try to lose yourself and show up. And finally, I would say, not be afraid to admit that, hey, I'm nervous. That's okay. By the way, that's okay. And I want to challenge a little bit, Scott, not so much what you said earlier, but just what does it mean to be strong? Because women are absolutely attracted to many things. And when it comes to our strength, I know from research, it's not just our strength about being, strong and powerful in a typical way we think about it. It's also strong to sit there and own our feelings and admit how we're feeling. That's what allows them in. That vulnerability is what they can then connect to. And they want that. So I just think there's a real opportunity around being vulnerable with who we're dating.
I agree with that. And I know time is short, and I have one more question I'm dying to ask you.
Sure.
It seems like young children in many, many circumstances do better with pressure than us old folks do. My kids are involved in BMX racing, and when my daughter was 5, she made the main event at the national championship final. Incidentally, well, not even coincidentally or incidentally, but at the same time, my wife had a good enough season where she made the main event with her peers in her age group, which of course is adult women.
Sure.
The way BMX works is there is a gate and you balance on it, and there's a moment where you have to spring like a rubber band into action, and the next 45 seconds of your life have to be relatively mistake-free, or else you'll crash or you'll lose.
Right.
The 5 and under expert girls were like little robotic machines. Every little girl in the gate got out of there like a slingshot. They battled bar to bar, trading paint in the corners, trading positions, pedaling their brains out all the way through. All of them made it through. All of them raced their hearts out, and it was just breathtaking to watch. These kids weren't even in kindergarten yet. Meanwhile, you get the women up on the gate, and they're dabbing a foot and shaky on the gate. 2 of them crashed in the main, and they lost their minds. What is it about adulthood and overanalyzing things and formal operations logic that sort of causes us to get in our own way again? And how can we go back to having the mind of a child, maybe?
That's a great question, Scott. It's all about something called impression management. A lot of our time of our day, whether we're performing or not, but especially performing, is taken up. Our bandwidth in our brain is taken up by impression management. We're worried about how we come across, managing our impression. And so for a lot of people who are under pressure, who are, older, 5-year-olds, they're not thinking about that. They're just totally in the moment.
And in all fairness, I don't think they truly understood the gravitas of a national championship.
I would agree. For them, it's just another fun race. And think about that. If we could just turn everything into just this moment of enjoying whatever it is we're doing, we will perform. That's the irony. We will perform better in that moment versus if we think, oh my gosh, this is the most important game or competition of my life. And, I'm worried about the respect I'm going to get or not going to get from other people. No, just let that go. And that's, by the way, I'll just say one more thing. A real important part to being able to perform under pressure is actually to be mindful, to be able to stay, not run when things get hot, to actually have some skills to manage our emotions and our brain under pressure. And that is something that all of us, that's what I do in the last 8% morning. We have literally give people insights and tools to manage their brain under pressure so they can be better with their partner or someone they're dating. They can be better in that sales situation. They can be better as a leader. These are learnable skills. That's the exciting part to me.
Well, I'll tell you what, practice matters too. I mean, those little 5-year-old girls have still taken hundreds of practice gates on a BMX track.
For sure.
Right?
For sure.
The guy who's been out on 100 dates this year will kind of go into autopilot and do what's always worked, even when he's particularly excited to meet a certain woman. And of course, your Olympic gymnasts who go out there and stick their routine with literally a third of the world watching them have done that routine 400 times. And then they just go into lizard brain mode, slough off that which is going to make them more nervous and go out there and perform. Is it easier for them? Of course not. But they just go out and throw down anyway. And I think that's another thing that should be certainly said in any discussion of how to handle pressure. But we are out of time. His name is JP Pawliw-Fry. He is the author of Performing Under Pressure and the upcoming book, The Last 8%. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put his New York Times best-selling book at the top of my Amazon queue, and you'll be able to find it along with all the other books written by our illustrious guests over the years at mountaintoppodcast.com/Amazon. I'm also going to point you to his website where JP's got all sorts of goodies. You already know he's smart, knows what he's doing, and has a lot of good things to say. Well, there's even more where that came from at mountaintoppodcast.com/JP. That's mountaintoppodcast.com/JP. JP Pawliw-Fry from Toronto, Canada. Thank you so much for joining us today. It's been a great conversation.
Pleasure's been mine. Have a wonderful day.
Yeah, you too, man. And guys, when you go to mountaintoppodcast.com, please be sure to visit our sponsors, Origin in Maine and HeroSoap.com. You can use the coupon code Mountain10 with either of our fine sponsors to get yourself some fantastic protein powder, some BJJ gis that are the best in the business from Origin, the great jeans, the great boots, all of that wonderful stuff from Jocko Willink's company, Origin in Maine. What would you expect other than excellence from Jocko, right? Also, at Hero Soap, you'll be the best smelling guy, best feeling guy, because all of the soap from HeroSoap.com and the body wash not only keeps you healthy because of the natural ingredients, but it makes you smell like a man. Good stuff there. You can find links to both Origin in Maine and HeroSoap.com by visiting mountaintoppodcast.com. While you're there, please sign up for the newsletter. I give you fluff-free advice on being a better man and getting better women in your life and improving the relationships with the women you do have in your life on the daily. And you can also get the free book, Sticking Points Solved. It won't cost you a dime. And guys, if you have not talked to me yet for free for 25 minutes about where you are and where you'd like to be with the women in your life, doesn't matter whether you're single or in a relationship already. Let's do that. Let's put a plan of action together. And at the very least, you will emerge from that call with something actionable that you can do to make your relationships with women better. It's all there for you and more at mountaintoppodcast.com. And until I talk to you again real soon, this is Scott McKay from X&Y Communications in San Antonio, Texas. Be good out there.
The Mountaintop Podcast is produced by X&Y Communications. All rights reserved worldwide. Be sure to visit www.mountaintoppodcast.com for show notes. And while you're there, sign up for the free X&Y Communications newsletter for men. This is Ed Roy Odom speaking for the Mountaintop Podcast.